On this episode of the Hustle the Day podcast, I have Jonaed Iqbal. Jonaed focuses on what people bring to the table, not where they went to school. You're going to want to listen to this one. Let's jump into it. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hustle the Day podcast. My name is Trent. I've got Jonaed Iqbal, and this is like the fourth take. I've messed it up so many times.
No, you got it.
You just got to jump in here and tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I help people without college degrees find meaningful jobs that pay well. I'm the founder of NoDegree.com and the NoDegree podcast. And my life's mission is to remove the stigma attached to people without college degrees.
I love that you have that life mission. And we were talking before, I personally don't have my college degree. And so I really resonate with this. I think this is an awesome idea, and that you are somebody who's standing up for, that person that doesn't have that degree but still has the skill set. What kind of made you dedicate your life's mission to this?
So I found the domain about 6 years ago. I was on Reddit, and someone asked the question, for those of you without college degrees who make over six figures, what do you do and how'd you get the job? And there were jobs like, I'm a claims adjuster, I repair elevators, I'm a bus driver for this certain thing, or I've been working how'd you get the job? Oh, my teacher told me I should check this out. Oh, my cousin, my uncle, a lot of the right place at the right time. There was no formula for it. So I was like, why can't I be that teacher or that friend or that uncle or that cousin, right? Because what if you don't have that uncle or cousin? Do you not deserve to not get the job, right? Do you deserve, you should not be denied the opportunity. So then I was like, oh, I went to trades.com right away. It was like available. I'm like, they're going to ask like $100K for this. I'm like a barely scraping by college student. I can't afford this. I went to NoDegree.com, put in an inquiry, got an email a few days later, didn't respond, and then they came back with the price, $1,833 or so, $1,800, something around there. Mm-hmm. And then I called like a couple of my buddies. One didn't answer, the other two answered, and we got the domain. We bought it for like $1,433. We negotiated, and that's how it started. It was like as soon as I saw the domain was available, I was like, yo, this is my lottery ticket. This is what's gonna make me, I'm gonna hit it big. And the idea just really developed over time, but the goal is really to be like a resource for those without college degrees.
That's very awesome. And then you not only, started several years ago, but it's now become your full-time deal, right?
Yeah. I mean, I gave a corporate job where I was making good money. I had a good trajectory, but I'm just a hustler, man. It's like at corporate, it's like being in the cage. It's like you have to follow all these rules that are put in place because there's one guy that they made the rule for, and it just like, I'm not a morning person. I'm just different. I'm always reading about marketing, search engine optimization, public speaking, all these things I'm always reading about. And it's like, okay, at corporate, it's like, okay, well, you showed up at 9:05 yesterday. It doesn't matter how much you know about, marketing. That's not part of your job. So it's like, for me, I needed to sort of do this.
Yeah, that's very cool. And, that's something that, you mentioned a little bit ago about, somebody who knew somebody that told you about this job. At one point, I've had a lot of entrepreneurial experiences, but at one point I needed to have just a job to get an income going. And I worked retail. I worked at Best Buy. And I found out through working there that you could rise to the level of a store manager without having a college degree. And so I was like, oh, great. And, they make six figures, and, that seems like a good career path. And I quickly learned that, like you said, it's the cage analogy. It just wasn't for me.
Best Buy has literal cages for the video games. So
very true. They have quite a few things locked up in cages, and sometimes with the spirit that you and I have, it feels like a cage just working there. So at what point did you decide to make NoDegree your full-time job?
Now, unfortunately, I wish I could have made it full-time in 2014, right? I was getting my master at Columbia University in actuarial science. I actually went to college, right? My undergrad is in applied math economics. So I'm a very analytical guy who just happens to have some things on top of that. And it was just like, it takes time to have a startup make money, right? Because I'm young. There was a lot of things I didn't know. Despite knowing a lot at the time for my age, I still needed to learn a lot more, right? So I needed a job, unfortunately, like a regular job, and it was just one of those things that I was developing over time. Like I spent my free time reading about this. I spent, worked on my public speaking and presentation skills, just kept on reading about different things. And then in 2019, is it 2019? No, 2018, August 2018, I cashed out my retirement. But before that, so as an actuary, you have to pass exams.
Mm-hmm.
So these exams take about 100 to 300 hours of studying. And in order to maintain your job, you have to pass an exam every 18 months. And they're like 8 exams. So it's like one of those things. You pass an exam, you get like a 3 to 6K raise. And once you pass a certain amount, you're like in the middle, you get like a super raise and all that. So it's a very stable career. My job wasn't too busy, even though it was 40-hour work week, depending on the week, you may have only had 20 to 30 hours of work. And then you spend the extra time studying outside, right? So what I did was I passed like one exam at 18 months and I refreshed my clock cycle. And then, so I'd work on my stuff, refresh. And then towards the end, I was getting to a point where I was going to fail. And I was like, look, I can't study for these exams because that's 100 to 300 hours that I could put into my business. And that's what I want to do. I don't want to do this career. So then I took another job where I didn't have to study, right? So then I took another job, just to pay the bills, right? I was making like 85K. So I was, right, more than just paying the bills. But again, it was just like, it was like I was a contractor for the city. Again, you have to come in at this time. You have to take this hour lunch, no flexibility. I like the people and the stuff, but I just didn't like that aspect. It wasn't me, man. I'm not a morning person. I was like late every day, and I'm just not me. It's like I'd rather have a meeting at 2 a.m. than 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. I can do that easily. And then it was just, I took another job actually with my dad's friend who had a startup, and it was good, right? And I still keep in contact with him today. I'll probably have to call him after the call, after this podcast recording. But again, it came to a point where I was like, I just needed the time to work on it. I was like, I have so many things to do, and I know what can be done, and I'm just losing this time at work. So I was like, screw it. I cashed out my retirement. It was like, whatever. It was like 20K, but not just to pay off some bills. And I was broke for like almost like a year. Just small things. I had like an ATM business, my friend, so I would make a couple $100 a month off that. And I'd tutor here and there, just whatever to so for the pocket change. And I was dipping into my saving, slightly running up the credit card. But thankfully now my company's cash flow positive. I mean, it's not like I'm making a crazy amount, but I'm paying off the bills. I'm not spending money, and I can cover all the expenses of the company and have a little for myself.
That's awesome. Congratulations on doing that and just realizing that that wasn't the path for you, and that you took the leap. A lot of people aren't willing to take the leap and cash out their retirement and give up that stability. So I applaud you for being able to do that.
So one thing I'll say is that it's not for everyone, because look,
for sure,
I was very fortunate. I was 27 at the time. I specifically lived at home because I knew, look, first few years of any startup is rough. And I live in NYC, if I had an additional, 2K a month in expenses after all that, that's 2K a month that I cannot put into my business. And I know I'm going to do well. So it's like, I'd rather buy my parents a house and pay it back, right? I don't mind sacrificing. I'm not here to please anyone. Who cares that I live at home despite being 29, almost 30? What I care is about, what am I doing when I'm 35? What am I doing? Because, moving out, I would have never been able to quit, right? I would have never been able to. And, right? So that's how I look at it. It's like, you got to think long term.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great that you're able to have that mindset and that mind frame to look at it long term. So many people are focused on tomorrow or next week or the weekend or whatever the case may be. So you cashed out your retirement. You are doing all these little side hustles trying to get by.
Yeah.
What would you say has been your biggest failure in your own business, and what did you learn from it?
It's tough because failures happen all the time, but it's just a part of entrepreneurship. I would say I spent like 20K on Bitcoin on different cryptocurrencies, and I did it at the wrong time. If I did it a few months earlier, I would have been like super well off. But it is what it is. It's the ability to bounce back. So I mean, I just see it as, look, I learned my lesson, and look, when I did it, I knew what I was like, look, this can either go really well or really bad. And it's not like I didn't know what I was getting myself into. It's not like, hey, I was so blindsided. I knew what I took the risk and it went down. But that's the part of life. The main thing I knew is I could afford the downside risk, right? That I could afford, right? Look, if I had a family that super depended on me, if I had kids, I would not have done that move. So I'm always very calculated, right? That comes from the analytical side. That I know here's the up scenario, here's the down scenario, and I'm always ready to sort of bounce back and move forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know what? That's good that you are calculated in it. I could probably stand to be a little more calculated because I do have 3 kids and a wife, and
Yeah.
that's
So don't
sometimes
make the moves I make.
I still jump in though sometimes. So
Yeah.
it's part of the fun is the risk involved in it. But
yeah, another failure that I really want to add is that you're a hustler. We know so many things, right? We learn about so many different aspects, so many different scenarios because you sort of have to. But the one mistake I did was I didn't focus on a few things. And that sort of, because it's, we hustlers have the shiny toy syndrome. Oh, there's this new thing. We could do this, we could do that. But the only ideas that are worth anything are the ones you stick to, are the ones you follow up with, right? So you want to you can do many things, but at least have a few things that you spend a little more time on, that you're a little better on, because it's just easier that you don't like doing everything, right? And it's better to focus on things that you like doing because you can focus more on them. Like you can easily work 40 to 60 hours if you're focusing on a few core things that don't drain you, versus if you did some tasks that you don't want to spend the majority of your time on those tasks. You want to minimize those tasks. So one of those things is I should have spent more time focusing in and honing on a few areas, because once you get super good at those things, you free up time in other areas, or you make enough money or get enough ROI from those activities that you can outsource the ones that you're not getting to.
absolutely, completely agree with that. Ed Milet, I was on a call with him at one point, and he said that it's a common misconception that the average millionaire has 7 sources of income. What they do is they are laser focused on one thing that makes them that millionaire. Then they can diversify.
Yeah.
Then they can spread it out. It's not trying to do 7 things at once.
Yeah. Look, you might have like 2 or 3 things, but you literally, because each thing you do has a different funnel, right? I've done many things, right? I've done tutoring, right? I've resold sneakers. I've just whatever, right? I've helped people move, but the thing is, each has a different funnel. So if I want to get into tutoring, I have to focus on networking with parents. I have to focus on this. I have to focus on keeping up to date, keeping up with the news, keeping up to the trends in that industry, right? And the other thing is, when I had the ATM business with a friend, again, that's a different thing. That takes up a certain amount of time. That's a different way to get more locations and all that. That's a different aspect. And then reselling sneakers, you got to follow sneaker forums and all that. So it's like each has a different thing. And if you spread yourself across all 3, you're just going to be sort of average or suck at all 3, just because each has a different time. Versus if you just got so good at reselling sneakers, you could do all that. Or if you got so good at tutoring, or in the funnel aspect, right? Not necessarily the ability, the funnel aspect, focusing on that, then it's like you have all the network of parents, you have all the network of sneakers resellers and other partners that you sort of need to all the store. So it's like you can't really, there's only so much time you have. So be smart with your funnels.
Absolutely. I love that. It's common logic, everybody has the same 24 hours in a day, and if you divide it amongst so many things, you're not going to excel at any one thing. So you went to college, you had a good career. At what point did you feel like the person who didn't have a degree was underserved? I mean, it being usually
the whole time.
Usually it's born from, you didn't have a degree and, you couldn't get the job. So you relate to it that way. So how did you find that relation?
So for me, it's like, as soon as I saw the domain and I read that thread, it was like, boom. Because I kind of saw, look, school, some people should go to school, some people should not. It's just one of those things. There's no one size fits all. Because when you have a one size fits all solution, you have winners and losers. And what happens is the losers, it really hurts them. They're in debt, they're shunned upon. And even the ones who don't get in school, they're looked upon as, oh, you're not as smart. You know, a lot of conversation. Where'd you go to school? Like, why is that? Like, you're asking someone 40, 50 years old, where'd you go to school? That's something they did like 20, 30 years ago. Why does it matter? Focus on what they're doing now. And a lot of times they assign characteristics. Oh, you went to Harvard. You must be ethical. There are plenty of Harvard people, Harvard lawyers who defend the worst types of criminals, who get them off. So it's like, why do you assign them? Like, what's so ethical of someone who goes to Harvard and works at Goldman Sachs? There's nothing ethical. They're just purely going for money. They're not there to change the world, which is okay, but don't think of them as morally superior in any way, or don't think of them like, I meet so many people of all backgrounds, and it's like, I don't even care about the degree. I care about them as a person, them as a human being. So I don't like how people are really defined by where they went to school. Because look, I went to Columbia, and honestly, it's full of a bunch of rich kids who have spent more in a weekend than, that our parents earned in a month, right? That they have no worries. Like, I knew kids whose parents were paying $3 to $10K a month in rent. And on top of that, they had spending money. So, and then, you want to talk about fairness? It's like, come on, they had tutors their whole life. They had a thing pampered for. They didn't have to worry about like buying, whatever. They never, like, to them, it's a whole different lifestyle. So it's like, I realized how privileged some people were. That even the ability to spend 4 years in school is a privilege, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's like, look, if I could have been in a situation, if my father passed away at 18, how would my life be? Right? If I had a tragedy, if I wasn't born in this country, but if I didn't live in the US, or if I grew up in a different part, you just don't know. So it's like, I just realized that people come from all circumstances, and everybody should at least have some access to opportunity, right? Because Absolutely. A lot of people who go to these schools, if you look at the stats, only like a small percentage of people actually come from like the bottom 20%. Majority of kids come from the top 10% of wealth. And it's like, how is it fair? It's not true meritocracy, right? If you don't have access to a violin lesson that costs $100 to $200 an hour when your parents are barely scraping by a minimum wage, right?
Mm-hmm. Very, very good point. I appreciate you saying that, and you know what? It's true. It is what it is. So I appreciate that you are fighting for, what many would consider to be the underdog, the person that doesn't have that degree. So you've got this personality where you're trying to fight for those that are underserved. You have been in a situation where you've been around all these privileged individuals, and you came out with this completely different attitude of, I'm going to focus on my own thing. It's just a bunch of anomalies put together almost, like,
that's life.
So who was it that would you say was most influential on who you became today?
Honestly, there's not one person, just because I kind of see that we are the summation of many, many different people, right? Obviously, my parents, right? I've seen my father work, and they really pushed me to do a lot of things. I'm fortunate that they did. We weren't rich, but they did pay for tutor. They're always on top of me in school, and like, their parents are a big factor, right? If you have crappy parents, it just really sets you back, right? I've seen people who are hardworking, but their parents my parents aren't the best, but they sure aren't the worst, right? They definitely did what they could with the best of their knowledge and abilities, right? Like, my father, he was like a butcher, a limo driver, taxi driver, convenience store. Now he's been doing construction for like 20 years. And, he worked in several different countries. So he was just, I wouldn't be here without him, and, obviously my mother, and, even just like my parents, right? Like, I realized that school came easier to me than a lot of people. When I took tests in school, I was typically like I was the one, it was like, all right, how fast can you finish the test and how high, right? So I'd be like the first one done or top 3 done. Like, and I'm talking about even in the whole grade, like, I would be able to almost finish the test like top 5, right? So for me, I realized that it came easier. Like, I didn't have to study as much. And I realized that sometimes it's just, look, you just get blessed, right? Some people just pick up, right? They're like LeBron James, right? As hard as he works, if he didn't get those physical genes, he might have still been average, right? He would have had the work ethic and still be good, but he needed to be 6'8". He needed to have those genes on top of that. So a lot of people just don't realize that sometimes you just have these opportunities. And then the other thing is, 2 of my big inspirations are, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and this is definitely that was one of the book I read in high school, and it was just like, wow, like, this guy went to prison, turned his life around. He learned the law. He learned philosophy. And, you know, people still watch him 4 years, and the guy learned it in prison. He just read and read. And he was like, look, I'm going to make a change. Another one is definitely Muhammad Ali, just how he stood up for his beliefs and just the fact that, you know, he's one of the best public speakers of all time, right? One of the most charismatic people, right? And never went to college.
Right.
And if you think about it, it's like he definitely achieved a lot more than anybody with a PhD ever could achieve, right? The amount of impact he had on the world, right? The amount of people he inspired. So it's like, I really love those without college degrees who sort of do it, and they can speak eloquently, right? They can have debates with people who have much more, right, education than them on paper. But it's like, they know, right? It doesn't stop them from learning and improving and making change in the world.
Absolutely. That's very cool. And you've got a picture of Muhammad Ali behind you there. That's very cool. I didn't think of, you know, you don't think about it that way, that the amount of impact that they've had, and without, you know, having that college degree behind him. I mean, that's really cool way to think of it, and a cool spokesperson in a way of no degree.
When you do actual things, people don't care where you go, right? No one cares where Arnold Schwarzenegger went to school, right? No one cares about that, right? It's just, what are you doing for the world, and what change are you making? At that point, if you have to fall back on that college degree and you're like 50 years old, you have to fall back on, hey, this guy. And it's like I don't even like introducing that I went to Columbia. And most people are like, oh, you went there? I was like, yeah. But, you know, it's like, it doesn't define me, and it shouldn't. That's not what I did. All it did was give me a bunch of student loans, right? That's what it did for me.
Yep, I'm well aware of that. So you've been trying to maximize your impact that you can have with this platform that you have, but you've mainly been doing it through your podcast and through LinkedIn. How crucial have those been in, you know, funneling those people into NoDegree?
So the podcast is super important, because what happens is, as you grow, right, and an entrepreneur, your time is super valuable. And it's not that I don't want to help people for free. It's that I literally don't have time. That I get multiple people asking me, hey, how do I prepare for an interview? How do I get this job? And it's like, I'd love to spend time on you. I just don't have it. And then the other aspect is, there are a lot of people who just want your time, who are not ready to invest in themselves. So I created episodes specifically how to prepare for an interview. So if someone wants to use me one-on-one, cool, they can use my pricing. If I know, look, not everyone can afford that, which is fine. So I say, look, I created this free resource, go check it out. So that's one thing. The podcast saves me conversation. And then I'll tell, you know, for anybody who's listening to this podcast, if people say, hey, I listened to that interview, I have no time taking out extra time out of my day, because if someone's investing in themselves, I'll put a little time at no charge into them. Like, hey, this is what you got to do. Because the thing is, I've sent that podcast episode probably 1,000 or 2,000 times. I only have like 200 downloads on that episode. So that means only 10% of the people I've even sent the episode to have even listened to it. So why would I waste my time on someone who can't even spend 40 minutes on a resource that they're asking me for? They just want their handheld, right? You come across entrepreneurs who want, hey, give me all this thing. It's like, you haven't done any research. You're not putting in the time. So that's one thing. The other thing is, it's like, I want people to hear these stories, right? Content is super important. So I want people to know, hey, how do you become an electrical contractor? How did this guy who, you know, the CEO of Scribe Media, how did he go from scrubbing toilets to being a CEO? What was the life journey? How did this person become a sales trainer? How did this person get to where they are? What skills do they do? Because a lot of times people just don't know. It's lack of knowledge. So I kind of want them to see, hey, I had this job. I leveraged this. Here are the skills that helped me. Here are the mistakes I made. So that's sort of why I created the podcast. And the LinkedIn, honestly, it gives me connection to people who are hiring, right? People who are sort of it allows me to really connect and network with people, right? We met on LinkedIn. I've gotten almost all my podcast guests purely off of LinkedIn. And it allows me to really just learn and grow. Like, I've learned how to do resumes off a person of LinkedIn, and that's how I make like 90% of the money that my company makes. And it allows me to help people too. So it's like all the things, it's like LinkedIn has definitely helped me grow and really connect with people. And now I'm like at 19,000 followers, and I'm continually growing. So it gives me a platform and a funnel. And now companies sort of take me more seriously. Like when I reach out, they're like, oh, okay, this is not just random Joe Schmo. This is someone who has a platform, who has followers, and companies respond to that, and people respond to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, like you said, we met through LinkedIn through a mutual friend who said, "Hey, you've got to have this guy on," and you know, I'm definitely going to send him a thank you card after this because this has been awesome. But I listened to a couple episodes of your podcast prior to this, and I love that, you know, you are highlighting that aspect of people, you know, where they got their start. Like one of the more recent ones, Joseph Gonzalez that you had on. That was a really
MIT
cool
dropout.
one. Yeah, it was really cool to hear his story of how, you know, his path went. And anyway, yeah, I really appreciate that you're doing your podcast. As much as I enjoy doing the podcast, I love hearing other people's stories as well. And that's kind of why I do this podcast. I love to hear other people's stories of how they're navigating through business. And personally, LinkedIn hasn't been a strong suit of mine, but I've met some great individuals through it. And it is something that I think if you are starting today, you do need to spend some time on it for sure.
I would spend like 40 hours a week some weeks.
Okay.
So I spend, and look, I got 3 of my business. I have another sort of business that integrates into mine. I do virtual events, like virtual career fairs and all that. So I started that, again, 3 partners that I know purely from LinkedIn. And now it's like we're actually making money. It's another part of my business that integrates into the overall picture and vision of NoDegree, because I want to host a NoDegree career fair where all the speakers don't have college degrees, and they talk about, and all the companies who come are open to hiring those without college degrees. So it's like, you know, it's just one of those things. You put the time in, you know how to add value, you know how to connect with people. And I think I would say one of the reasons I have success is I'm always giving back. Like I'm always like trying to stay, hey, who would you like to have on your podcast? Or how can I help you? Or I'll help their friends and stuff. And that's why people help me, right? I'm not going out pitching, hey, I need X, Y, Z. It's like, go look to help others, and you'll see that it just magically comes back.
Absolutely. That I completely agree with that. I've seen that so many times in people that I've been involved with. Giving back is the best way to have things reciprocate to you. You know, Gary Vaynerchuk famously talks about that, you know, of how he gives all his content out for free. And it goes back to what you said. He's like, I know only 1% of the people are actually going to execute on anything that I say.
Yeah, it's so true.
It's crazy that's the case, but you know what?
You can literally write a playbook, how to become a billionaire, give it out for free, and even then, only 1% will execute.
It's crazy, but you know what? That's at some point it will resonate with someone, and that's what makes the difference. Is why we're doing this. So if somebody was starting their own thing today, what's the one single piece of advice you would give them?
Start small and figure out a smaller version of it. So for me, it's like, how do I get my company? How do I get my company to start making money? And it's like, find something that you could do on the side. So it's like, hey, I could have, if I knew, I would have done resumes on the side at my job before, right? To start learning, getting into it. So you can start a podcast on the side. You can start one aspect of your business on the side, because oftentimes we fall in the love of the idea of escaping from work and doing something on our own, but it's so much harder. And oftentimes you may have to even put in more time than you did before. So you have to at least be okay with the idea and spending 40 to 50 hours on it. It's different, right? Spending 2 to 3 hours. So do that and figure out what's your path to monetization, and have an idea, and figure out, you really have to know yourself. You have to know like what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like doing, what you don't like doing, because that's how you can segment your tasks. So really just read. Honestly, reading is just something that a lot of people just don't do. I find so many people, like, you're going to see that there are 2. I go to a lot of when things were better, I go to a lot of networking events. I would go, and entrepreneurial focus, and people are always developing the same ideas. So there are 2 apps that always fail: the business card app and the come to this place and meet people with similar interests. I'm pretty sure you've heard those apps. So many people, look, 6 years ago, I heard the business card app 6 years ago, and I still see people developing it. And it's like, look, I'm not saying that the same idea can't work, But if there's one or two ideas that have routinely failed, that's when you have to do something completely different than all other people, right? Because you have to know why they fail. You can easily copy ideas and be successful because the market is big enough, but so many people just don't do any research. And it's like, if I knew this idea failed every time, I would actually look, why did it fail? Is it because of traction, X, Y, Z? And then figure out. So it's like, do research and read. Just read. It's like, as an entrepreneur and network, read and network. Those are the two things that you got to do, because you'll go in many different directions, but your knowledge will always stay with you and follow with you, and your network will always follow through. There are some people I've networked with years ago that I'm reaching back out to now. Why? Because I have a relationship with them, and it's no longer a cold call. And it's not like when I networked with them, I intended to be like, I'm gonna reach out to this guy in 3.5 years. It's just like, now our things align.
Absolutely. That's solid advice. Honestly, that the networking thing has been a more recent thing for me, because I've for a long time have identified as an introvert, and I realized that was a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I've been a lot more focused on the networking, and then that all got shut down for a while. But
I'm actually writing an article on networking for introverts on my website.
Perfect.
And the beauty is, it's like, you don't have to do it like anyone else. You can choose to do, hey, I only do one networking event in a week. Because the beauty is that you don't need thousands of connections. You just need a few good connections who are there to help you out. That's all that matters.
Yeah. So speaking of networking, one of the great thing about going to events is the networking aspect. So now that you're holding virtual events, how do you integrate the networking into that for the audience, so it's not just person talking to audience?
Yeah. So the platform I use, feel free to message me. It's basically a visual platform that there are actual tables that you click around on. So each table can only host. So imagine, the Zoom breakout rooms?
Yeah.
So imagine that, but physically, and you can choose which breakout room you go to. So there are like 20 tables, and you can click, and there's a limit of 6. So that's it. So it's a very unique platform that I jumped on. And so that's sort of how I facilitate that. And the beauty is, apparently, I talk to a lot of introverts. They find that they like it. It doesn't drain them the same way. It's not the same thing. And they can move tables at the click of a button, right? They can exit the event. They can close the browser anytime they want. So it is sort of freeing from that aspect. So that's sort of how I facilitate the networking.
Absolutely. That's very cool. I do want to find out some more information about that. But I will second that in being introverted. My best friend right now, I actually met through Twitter, because it was just one of these things where it's like, it's different being electronic. I can,
social
more
media
act myself, and
and the good thing is, on social media, those deep, insightful comments, other people resonate with that. Like, one of the reasons I grew on LinkedIn is because I wrote like 50 to 100 comments a day, and they weren't like, thanks. I see some people just send a thumbs up and a heart. No one knows you from that. Like, nothing, they don't learn about you as a person if you just send thumbs up on all these posts. But if you write like, hey, valuable advice, you're a hustler. If you give advice on, hey, failure, success, if you add, if you contribute, people will slowly start be like, oh, wow, that's a guy. And that's why people know me. Like, oh, wow, you're always commenting, you're always adding value. And that's why you attract good people. They're like, wow, I want to be connected with this guy, or I want to add value to this guy.
That's very cool. Yeah. And great idea of just, commenting valuable information. There's talk earlier of Instagram moving away from likes and just, trying to force the comments aspect of it. And that's what adds value. Double clicking a picture or something, or clicking like on LinkedIn just doesn't really do anything for engagement purposes and find more about you. And so I appreciate that that's what you're doing, and that's how you're growing your network.
It's just consistency.
Consistency for sure. I've met several high performing individuals, and that's the main thing that they say is consistency, and that's will get you where you want to go. So what is it, and this can be personal or business, but what is it that excites you about the future?
Change, right? We're talking at a time when there are lots of protests and stuff. And, same thing with me. It's all about moving forward as society. That I want to move forward as a society where people don't have to worry about these things, right? They don't have to worry about certain interactions with certain groups of people and all that. And, just removing stigmas attached to people, because I think so many people are just judged before you ever get to know them.
Right.
That they're judged by their education, they're judged by where they grew up, they're judged by where they live. And that's sort of like the mission of NoDegree. Like, don't judge. Right? You never know how much your car mechanic knows about dinosaurs or history, right? Just because they're a car mechanic. And you also don't know how little your doctor knows about everything else, right? So it goes both ways, right? That you have these people who are very smart, but sometimes they're like, they can't change a light bulb. And then you have these other people who are so knowledgeable. I remember one of my business partners, he was at the grocery store and he was talking to the meat guy. And this guy was talking for like 20 minutes about all these different certifications and all this stuff he was working on. And he was the butcher, right? It was just like, I really want that, where people really look inside, they look past the person, that they're willing to sort of take the conversation a step further, because you just never know who that person is.
Absolutely. That's a great message. And, I appreciate you sharing that. And then finally, I don't want to take too much of your time. You talked about how we're all limited in time.
I make time for especially podcast hosts, because I know how it is. So I got time. If you got questions, I got time.
Well, I don't want to take too much of it, but I do want to ask you, one more question that I typically always ask. What is your personal definition of the word hustle?
Moving forward and just learning that you can hustle, whether you have your own business, whether you're at work, even in your personal hustle in your friendships. Like for me, it's like I apply it to all aspects. Like, so my friend, I'm known as the guy that brings everyone together. So for me, hustling in terms of friendship, I'm always texting, reaching out, always making the phone calls, because so many people neglect that they're always looking to meet new people, that they forget the friends that they grew up with. And then 5 years later, they're like, wow, you got a kid that's 3 years old? Well, that's your fault. You should have called him. You should have called her. So hustle in terms of friendship, right? Helping them out, making sure that, hey, how can I improve my friends? Hustle in terms of your personal development, that it's like, hey, am I doing the things? Am I reading? How many people do you know that haven't touched a book in years, or they just don't read, right? It's just, or they don't consume knowledge in some format, right? That they just sort of, hey, I'll watch Netflix, I'll play video games, I'll be very, very passive. So, and it's about really self-awareness, that growing as a person, that I'm a different person than I was when I quit my job. I'm a different person than I was when I founded the company. I'm a different person today, and I'll be a different person next year, and that's okay. But hustling is just about, hey, improving yourself, changing the way you think, changing the way you look at things. And it's a lifestyle. It is, and it can come from like, I've seen people who work at jobs, right? And they hustle, right? They're always looking to improve, make things better for whatever they do. So it's just someone who's really looking to just make changes, not passive, right? You have to be active. That you can't be a passive hustler. You have to be like someone who's hustling. They're on the move. They're doing the next thing. They're always on. You want to talk to them. They have this passion and energy about them, regardless of what they do. That's in my definition of hustle.
Awesome. Being active. I love it. Not being passive, for sure. I think that's a great explanation of hustle. So where can people find more information out about you?
So if they want to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and I think you'll include in the show notes, my name is Jonaed, Jonaed, last name Iqbal. You can find the podcast on NoDegree.fm. So check that out. And I'm on several platforms. If you search up the NoDegree podcast, and then the website is NoDegree.com. I'm creating content. I'm focusing a lot more on content, just different life skills. Like there's some financial advice on there, some negotiation advice, sales advice. So that's where you can, and I'm pretty accessible on LinkedIn.
Yeah, very, very true. I checked out your website, and I do love all the articles and things that you have up there. But I want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to speak to me and to my audience, and grateful for all the value that you provided today.
No, thank you. I mean, I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for any of the audience members who are listening. I always appreciate podcasts.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I know my audience has gotten value out of this because I've gotten value out of this. So I encourage you to take this and get out there and hustle the day. Thanks for listening to the Hustle of the Day podcast all the way through. I really appreciate that. I just want to let you know that I help small businesses with their online strategy. So if you or anyone that you know needs help with their online strategy and owns a small business, I'm your guy. Go ahead and connect with me at Trent V Bray on Instagram or TrentVBray.com.